Okay, so I'm just going to go over general setup for rendering. So you can achieve a rendering similar to this, and I'm going to start with the floor plan that I set up for that level, which is the basement floor plan, and I'm going to begin with a camera view. And so usually when you render in Revit, you render perspective views that you create using a camera, but you can render any 3D view in Revit. So again, I'll start with the camera, and okay, don't say that. Okay, so I'm going to do something here that you probably want to avoid, but I just want to show you so that you can see some of the issues you might have when you create camera views. So I'm going to create a camera that's really close to the wall over here, and then I'm going to direct it in the area that I want to be looking, which is towards the stair. And firstly, notice I've taken the target a fair distance from the camera. That's one of the first traps to fall into. If you put the camera target too close to the camera, it'll crop the view. So take it out as far as you need to and include all the objects that you want to see where you place the target. Okay, so I've got my camera view there, but I probably want to see more than I can see with the view as it is. So I'm going to show you the steering wheel, or the navigation wheel, which you have a button for that you've probably seen in the in any view on the right, and you've got a few options there. When you click on the arrow under that nav wheel, you've got these different nav wheel options. So full navigation wheel, mini navigation wheel, and so on. I recommend just going for the full navigation wheel to begin with to get used to it, and then you can click on that tool and you'll see the different options. So you probably have thought when you open this up in other views like a plan or a section that it's not very useful. But with a camera view, it's the most useful way of adjusting a view. And it's the only way to do some things. So if you want to orbit, or we'll start with look. If you want to look in different directions with the camera, just click on look and it's rotating the camera, and that's very different to panning the view. You can also use orbit, which is orbiting around that target point. Pan is another useful one. So this is different to a normal pan. It's lifting the camera and the target up together or down. And then we have up down, which is similar, but only goes up and down. And then the one I want to use mainly is walk. So like I said before, I want to see more, so I'm going to try walking backwards. And walk takes a bit of getting used to. So to use walk, you need to click and hold on that option, and you'll see it comes up, or it gives you a little blue dot at the bottom of the screen, and your cursor is going to go to that. So you can move it then forward to walk forwards, or move it back from that dot to walk backwards. So that's one way of being able to see more, by walking backwards. But if I go too far, obviously I'm going to go into the wall. So I'm just going to try and go back to just before where the wall is. There we are. So there we are. So I'm just in front of the wall, you'd think, because I can see these objects. I might switch to a shaded view. Well, so I'm going to go to render now, and I'm going to change the scheme to interior artificial only. Hit render, and you'd expect normally to see some lights in action on the walls there. But what do I get? A black rectangle. So this is one of the common errors that will come up when you first go to render with Revit. The fact that it just won't render anything. And have you seen this before if you've tried rendering, that it just goes black sometimes? So the most common reason for that is that the camera is actually in a wall. Right, so I'm going to go to the basement plan, and then to see the camera view, do you know how to show the camera in a plan view? Right, the trick is, you need to know the name of the camera. So mine's 3D View 4. Right click and then show camera. So now I can see that the camera is actually inside or even behind that wall. So I'm going to drag it back to the right so that it's away from the wall, and open the view again. And if I go to render now, now I should see something. Oh, so just right click, so go to the plan view and then right click on the camera name in the project browser. So 3D view, whatever, usually, and then show camera. That's it. Okay, so now notice it's a lot slower than it was before, and that's because it's actually rendering something. So there we go. Okay, so it's working. I can see something. I know it's working. It's a little dark, but that's okay. I know the reason for that. So I'm going to close this and sorry, just checking. Yeah, okay, I've got a pad there as well. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the in the view, just zoom out with the wheel and then go to the border there. So instead of using the camera or moving the camera to show more, I'm going to drag that border out. Okay, so what that's actually doing is adjusting the field of view. If you've done any photography, you'd have an idea what that means. Basically, if I show you the view in plan again, or show you the camera in plan, you'll see that this cone has become wider. So that's affecting the view. So you need to be aware of that, and the fact that it's not moving the camera, we're widening the field of view to enable us to see more. You can still go to the steering wheel or navigation wheel and orbit the view to get a different angle. But then I'm going to then go back into the plan and check that the camera is not in the wall. This person as well, maybe she can move so that in my view I can see again she's in a different position, and that makes more sense to have her there. I've got a picture that's over there to the right. Well, I did, maybe I've deleted it. I'll sort of shake that out to see. Oh no, I must have deleted it. So I'm going to add in another picture there. So make sure you're aware of decals. If I go to realistic, you can see that it's going to show the decal that I've already placed, and I'm going to go into one of the section box views that I have and add another one. So decals are really useful for rendering. So you can just put images onto floors and walls and other surfaces like that. So on the Insert tab, you have decal, and if you've already created one, you need to go to Edit Type and then duplicate to place a new one. So I'll call it Painting 2. Edit, and then you get a dialog box which is similar to what comes up when you place your first decal. So just be aware, when you place it the first time it looks a bit different to this, but you get basically the same options. So now I can hit Browse and I'll choose one of my other paintings. So I can place it on the wall, and after it's been created I can adjust the size just by stretching. And there we go, so we can see that now in the view. So I'm going to go through materials in a second, because that's really important for rendering as well. But you can see there on the floor, my material's showing, but the surface looks a bit strange because there are actually two materials coming up there. And that's because there's a pad in the way. So I've added a floor on top of my pad, and that's a really good technique. If you're wondering how to add in a floor material over the pad, just add in a thin floor like I have there. That's just a 20mm floor. And so you can raise that floor, but I don't want to do that because I've got these other elements that are at that level. I don't want to have to change them as well. So I'm going to just select with a crossing window over one of the edges there, and then go to Filter, and you can see then that one of the items that has come up there is a pad. So So I'm going to turn off the other items, click OK, and now I can right click and then just hide in view elements. So that'll prevent it coming up in the render. And that's a really important technique. Whenever you're rendering, if you have things that are visible when you render that you don't want to show, sometimes you might try and spend time to adjust their position or something like that to stop them coming up in the render, and often the simpler way is just to hide in the view. And so I'll just maybe show you another variation on that. If I again show the camera, so I might want to bring the camera back a little bit so that it's inside the wall. So just like I showed you before, that would block the camera view in the render. But of course I can select this wall that my camera is inside, open up the camera view. Now we can't even tell that the wall's selected except by looking in properties here, but I can still hide it. So I can do hide in view elements, and that way if I just do a quick test render, again it won't come up. So a lot of the things you're doing when you're setting up a render are really things you're probably used to already, but maybe just being a bit more precise about the way you do things. And always do tests along the way to make sure it's working the way you want it to. So you can't just leave it until the end and hope that it's all going to work. Okay, so again I can see light and surfaces, so I know that the render is still on track. Okay, so now I want to start doing some materials. So I've got there a wall at the back that I want to maybe give a different paint colour to. So I just want to really spend some time on this because that's one of the things that gives people the most trouble in Revit, just deciding materials, which should be a pretty basic thing, but it's complicated because of the way things work in Revit. So I've got there this wall selected called generic 300mm wall. I'm going to go to edit type and duplicate. So if you're having trouble assigning materials, remember that step. If nothing else, duplicate the wall type to begin with if it's a wall, and I'm going to call it generic, not generic, 300mm wall, interior blue is the colour I want. Okay, so I'm going to hit edit structure, and I'm going to leave the layer that's already there, which is set to this white colour, because I still want that to show up on the outside. Right, so I'm going to insert a new layer, and notice, if you haven't seen before with a wall, these layers, you've got an exterior side at the top and an interior side at the bottom. That's really important that you're aware which side's which. So the bottom is the interior side. So I'm going to use the button there at the bottom down to move this layer I've created to the bottom, so it's on the interior side, and I'll make the thickness of that layer 10mm, so it's like a layer of render or plaster on the inside surface of the wall. And then I'm going to change the thickness of this wall structure to 290, which means my total thickness is still 300, and that's really important because I don't want the wall to change in position. Okay, and so then another thing you need to set is the function. So I've got to set the function there to finish 2, and that's something people, even if they're used to working in Revit, don't know which is better, finish 1 or finish 2. And basically, if you're not sure, finish 1 is for exteriors, finish 2 is for interiors. And so then the material I'll set now by browsing to the material editor. Okay, so again here, the step people usually forget is to duplicate first before you make any changes. So I might start with the finished material, that's the one I've already got assigned to the rest of the wall. So I want to make a blue version of this. So I'm going to right click and duplicate that material in the list on the left. And we'll call it finish, why not finish blue. And now the other step with materials people usually miss, and that is to go to the Appearance tab and replace that appearance. So don't just make changes without first thinking about what's happening there. And so again, replace the asset, and the appearance library you'll have in the left there in your list of folders is the best resource for getting render materials. And if you go to your wall paint folder, you'll have most of the colours that you'd want to start with already made for you. Okay, so we've got these different blue colours already created. Aquamarine, God, that is not aquamarine, anyhow, but that's what they've called it. Most of the others are pretty well named though, so periwinkle I could use, or I'm going to go to navy though. So double click to bring it in, and then you've got a brand new render material and you don't have to worry about other materials being affected. So I'm going to click on the colour swatch here and then just lighten that colour. So I want it more, much brighter blue. That's a bit too bright. That's a bit too dark. Yep, that's okay. Alright, so that's the blue I want. And you can make any other adjustments there. So you can make it eggshell instead of matte, which might be a good option here. And I'll go much more into more complex materials later on, but that should get you started if you're having issues assigning materials. And so that's just the appearance. Now I'm going to go back to graphics and tick use render appearance, which will match the colour that I've just set in the appearance. You can turn that off if you want to make further adjustments, but I'm happy to leave it as it is. So that's it. Now if I click OK, I've made this new wall which has an interior colour set to blue. And if I click to one side, you can see that it's then going to come up in the viewport there. And so now any other walls that I want to be the same finish, I don't need to go through that process again. I can just select them and then in properties choose that new wall that I've given the name to, so the mill interior blue. Right, so that's done basically, and so now I might change the floor material as well. So I'm going to select the floor, edit type, and so I've made a floor here called floating floor. I don't need to duplicate it because I want this floating floor material to change for all of the floating floors that I've got. So I'm not going to duplicate this time. I'm just going to go to edit, click browse, and I'm going to just change that appearance without even duplicating the material on the left. So maybe just to make it clear why you're duplicating. Where's I'm doing this? So in flooring wood, we've got all sorts of pre-made floorboard type materials. So I'm going to go for the Wild Cherry Groove. And just check that relief pattern and might make that a bit higher. Okay, so now I'm ready to render. And so if you're rendering with lights that you've added, so if you're not sure about lights, make sure you've had a look at the video that I've done on lighting, then the best option to use is interior artificial only. If you try to render with sun and artificial, it's very difficult to ascertain the brightness of your artificial lights. So it's much better to start with artificial only. and I'll do it again with draft. And what you find is basically everyone who renders professionally will render with low quality settings to begin with to get the settings right, the other settings, and then increase the quality afterwards once everything else is set up. Okay, so I've got an image coming up, and I can then go to adjust exposure to change the brightness. So I'm just going to make this a little bit brighter by adjusting that slider and then clicking apply. So that should be about right. Remember, as you increase the quality, it'll get a little brighter because there'll be more bounce lighting. So you don't need to make it the full brightness that you need, but just try and get it fairly close. And so then for the final render settings, for a project like this, I'd say you should be able to go to best, but I'm just going to go to high for now. In fact, so that you can see it happening, I'll go to medium and then I'll do one on high after I finish recording. So that's the first step, but then also you've got the output settings, and you want to make sure that's on printer, and then choose a resolution, at least 150, but then later if you can do 300 dpi for your final renders, that'd be good. But I'm just going to do 150 for now so it renders a bit more quickly. Then you have the image size, and so there you can see it's 210 by 147. If your pixel count is less than 1,000 for either of those values, the width or the height, then the resolution really won't be high enough. So I'm going to close the dialog box there, and then I'm going to select the border and go to size crop. Okay, so this is really important. You need to go to scale and then change either of those values to increase them. And so it's 147. I want to make it about 10% at least more than that. So I'm going to make it 165. Okay, so now if I go back into the render dialog box by clicking on the teapot, you can see that, well, pretty close, 976 pixels. So I'm just going to try and increase it a bit more. So back to size crop, scale, and then I'll make the height, let's try 175. Okay. So don't worry about zooming or panning when you do this, that's fine. And so now you can see that it's increased the pixel count there a little bit more, and I'm over 1,000. So that's about the resolution you want for your final renders, or the pixel count anyway. And if I go to 300, it'll be a nice high value. But on 150, that's pretty good. Alright, so then I also have lights that are upstairs, and I don't need all of those to come in downstairs. So this is another way of speeding the renders up. I'm going to go to a view where I can see some of these lights on the upper level. So I'm going to select some of them, and you can see that we have in properties a mark for those lights. So this one's 25, the next one next to it is 24, another one over here 23, and so on, 22. So it's got a pretty good numbering system. This one's 30. So I need to then go back into my perspective, go to the render dialog box, and I can click on artificial lights, and then click on new to make a new light group. I'm going to call this upstairs lights, So I'll add the lights to that in a moment. But then we're also going to go new and make downstairs lights. And then I'm going to make a third group that maybe isn't obvious, and this is for the lights that come down through the staircase. Okay, so I'm going to start with the section box again. And I'm going to turn on the section or the reveal mode so I can see the section box, and just bring it back so that I can then see. Sorry. So then I can just see inside the basement level there. Okay, I'm going to select some of those lights and look at their marks. So this one's 38, 39, and the next one should be 37. So 37 to 39 we'll start with. So back to 3D View 4, Render Dialog, Artificial Lights, and I can find 37 to 39 and then use Move to Group and choose the group I want to add them to. So these are downstairs lights. Click OK, OK again. I can select some of them in the view here. So here, this one is number 3, 7, 4, 5. So let's do those. So 3, just holding control down here, 7, 4 and 5. Again, move to group and downstairs lights. The spot there is number 8, the floor lights, numbers 36 and 35, so again 8, 36, 35, move to group, downstairs light. Takes a little while, but it will be worth it because of the saving in render time. So I'll just keep going through here and choose. So that one's done. The lights on the other side. So 2, 3, 1. I think that's most of those lower level lights done. What's this one? Yep, that's so 1, 2, 3. I think are the last ones on this level. So you can do it in this view too. So I can just go here and two, 1, and what was it? 6, I think. Yeah, I'll just check that. Yes, okay, so 1, 2 and 6, you can see them there in the viewport. Again, move to group and choose the one you want. Okay, so then I can go through and get the staircase lights, which is really important to have them separately grouped. So we have 42, 43, 14, 18. Okay, so let's do them. 17, hopefully, yep, 18. $14, $15, so you can guess sometimes, you can see where that's pretty good. And again, move to group, staircase lights. So just check this one here, is 41. Okay, and so the rest can go into the upstairs group. Right, so trust me on that one, if you do that extra work and group your lights, it makes a huge difference to your render time. So now in this perspective view, really important to save the file once you've done all of that work, because it will often crash at this point and you don't want it to crash and have to do all that work again. So then I can go to render, it'll render faster now, so I'll just set it to go. And so notice I've put some people in there. If you haven't tried putting people in Revit before, they're simply a family that you'll find in the Entourage folder. So there's one called male and one called female, and each of them have about 4 or 5 different variations. So you've got different photos of different people that you can place in Revit, even if they're just as placeholders. So you'll get a bit sick of using the same people over and over again in Revit if you only use those ones. But you can at least place them in, and they at least work in 3D when you render in Revit, and then in Photoshop you can easily replace them with better people, and you get the shadows. Yeah, I don't mind if you use Photoshop. I actually recommend you use Photoshop, but a really good approach is to just put the entourage in Revit so that it gives you the shadows and the placement of the people, and you can get the scale worked out without having to guess in Photoshop, and then replace them with a cutout that you've got in Photoshop. And do you know about immediate entourage? Immediate entourage? Okay, I'll show you that while this is doing its rendering. So that's one of the best sites for this sort of work. So just Google immediate entourage. Yep. So they're free cutouts, and they have thousands and thousands of them, and they're already cut out for you. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's so quick, and you get trees and things as well, skies, all sorts of things. So it's super quick, and so you can just go here, browse all, and they've got them at all different angles, and so you just need to choose the one you want, and you can simply save it and then copy and paste in Photoshop, and they come in perfectly cut out. You don't have to do any cutting out or anything. So yeah, it's a great little resource. Okay, yep, sure. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure, I'll come over, I'll show you in a minute. Yep. Okay, so while this is rendering, I'll just grab one of these and show you. You must be doing a Photoshop subject. Oh, you with Chris, of course. Yeah, you're doing the other half of this subject, and you'll be doing a presentation subject at some point, I'm sure, that's purely InDesign and Photoshop. But yeah, of course, you've got Chris's class at the moment. So You're probably doing a lot of this already, but I'll just show you anyway how easy it is. Okay, the internet here is normally a bit faster than this, but today the network's a bit congested. Let's see how the rendering's going. No, still going. Okay, we're down to his legs, that shouldn't be too much longer. Okay, so we've got it downloaded. It doesn't look like it's perfectly cut out there, but trust me it is. So if I go save picture as, and I'll just save it. Well, let's make a folder. So let's put one in here. In material images, I'll make one. We'll use cutout list. I know. I don't think people are going to realise. So let's make one. Oh, there's it. People on there we are. And okay. So in Photoshop. You'll see in a moment how easy it is to put those people in. Because you will get sick to death of the entourage people in Revit. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a file I've already rendered. So remember, when you're rendering in Revit, you can use Save to Project once the render is finished to save the rendering in your Revit file, but make sure you also know about the export option, which will let you save a rendering into a separate file. Alright, so I've already saved some. Okay, so there, should just look at the thumbnails to make sure. Oh, here we go. So this one unfortunately doesn't have the people in it, but I'll use that one anyway. Ah, okay, so it doesn't think it's the right sort of file. Sorry, what's going on there? Oh, that's a Revit file. Sorry, I did save some. Where have I put them? Oh, look, we'll just get another one. Okay, so here's a rendered image that I did earlier, and so yeah, well, it's a little, well, the exposure there. That's what I did to show incorrect exposure because the sunlight there is too bright compared to the dark areas, and I'd need to add in some extra lights to balance that out. But I can still show you the cutout person. That's a really easy thing. So just go open and find the file. Yeah, sure. Oh, just in the properties. Yeah, so you can just turn off things like the stringer and the riser. Okay, so there are a lot of people in that folder, but not all of them are cut out. So you're often better off just downloading your own. Okay, so here we go. We've got this guy I've just downloaded. Control A, Control C, switch to the one I want, Control V. Control T is the shortcut for transform, and that easy to get the people in. But has Chris shown you how to do, I'm sure he has, shadows in Revit? Good. So using multiply layers, yeah. Right, but there, you know, because I don't have the people from Revit, I'd have to spend a bit of time making sure the size of this guy was right, and that's work you shouldn't have to do if you've done it with an entourage person in your rendering in Revit. So let's see how that's going. There we go. Okay, so that's done. Alright, so export, and I can save that as a rendering, and I'll show you how much easier it is when you have it already done like that. Okay, so I've rendered with the people there, and so again I can just paste and very quickly rescale him and stick him over the top. Might be better to have a person that's not not like that, but yeah, you can also just do another render without the person, and but yeah, much easier than trying to guess. And the shadows there, sometimes it is easier just to get those from Revit. So if you find a person that's standing, here we go. I'll let you go through. Here we go, she'd be perfect because she's going to cover up. Anyhow, I'll let you have a look and see what you can find there. It's a great site, and so it shouldn't take you too long to add more interesting people than the ones you get out of Revit. And so it wouldn't hurt to do another render there with the people turned off. And of course it doesn't want to let me select anything. Revit's just freezing up a bit, but here we go. I can get the entourage that way, and VH to hide them. And render again without those, and just add another layer in Photoshop. I've seen people try to be really tricky and use clone stamps and things like that to take those things away, when really it's much easier just to render again and export again a new file. So anyhow, hopefully that'll help you with your rendering. And remember, of course, in Photoshop, make extra layers, copy your layers, and don't forget about the basic adjustments, like you know, everything you have on the adjustments menu there. Pretty much you'd want to go through most of those. Exposure is a really useful one. Change the brightness, not just brightness contrast, people just get that sometimes. So that's before, that's after. And so I'm sure Chris has been talking to you a lot about using levels, and what other adjustments has he mentioned? Yeah, brightness contrast is a good one, but for rendered images, I mean, brightness contrast is okay, but the problem there is that it's clamping. So if you take it up, it or down, it's doing it in a clamped way, whereas when you do it with exposure, it's not clamped. And also, but levels is good. Curves as well. It's one that people forget about. Levels is really good. And then a really good one for rendered images that, again, you might not know about is HDR toning. It's going to tell me it's going to be flattened. So I'm going to say no. Right, so if you want to do HDR toning, you need to do it with the original image. It's usually the way. So that's going to take too long. I won't wait for that, but I'll just show you with the one I rendered earlier. Okay, wants me to save it first. Okay, so I'm going to open up the original again. That's usually the best way to do it, with the original image. And again, adjustments, HDR toning, and so that's with the automatic setting. I'm going to take the radius down there, so it's a bit more fine grained, and then use exposure here, and also gamma. You can see it works in a different way to exposure normally, and so notice those areas that were a little bit too bright are toning down, but everything else has got a bit more punchy. The detail you can use as well to either add or remove detail. It's basically adding grain or removing. You can also take the highlights down here if those areas are still too bright. The vibrance is a really useful one as well, to take if it's too the colours are too vibrant, and also saturation. So you can see there, if I compare that to the original, how much cleaner this looks without the lighting on the walls. The floor there, maybe the grain is too much, so I can reduce the detail, and also the radius there. You can take down. So yeah, lots of options there. That floor material has some other issues which would make it well, worth adjusting back in Revit. And yeah, lots you can experiment with there. So again, comparing that, you can see it's quite a dramatic change. Oh, that's just in your stair properties in Revit. So I'll show you in a second. I'll come over and have a look. Alright, so yeah, just make sure you've got an idea about one of those options. And so back into Revit, it's still going, so I won't worry about waiting for that to finish. But again, hopefully you can try most of those things.